I'm Alice.
And I'm Brett.
And this is the Prosecutor's Legal Briefs. Welcome back to the Prosecutor's Legal Briefs. I'm your host, Alice, and I'm joined, as always, by my preview-lific co-host, Brett.
Hello, Alice. That was not a word, but I'm happy to be it nevertheless.
Not a word at all. But you know what? When you are already almost through October and already this season of SCOTUS is just bumping along, you're going to make up some words, because if you've been looking at the news, everyone's like, every case is going to be overturned. Stare decisis is just going to be like, I know, we're all shrugging a little, like stare decisis, nothing's going to matter anymore. Everything is going to be the end. And we're really only 3 weeks into October. As those of you who've been with us for multiple seasons of SCOTUS, Supreme Court of the United States, you may know that the term starts in October. So we're really within the beginning weeks of this term. It goes from October to May, June, arguments, and then the last opinions come out in June. That's kind of like a academic year, shall we say, for SCOTUS. So we're at the beginning of it. There's a lot of meaty cases already. We knew that cert had been granted. We knew that briefing was already ordered and they're going to be argued, and they have. Some are on the cusp of being argued. Some have been moved in favor of other cases that are going to be argued. All to say is, this season is not going to be one to disappoint. So in looking forward to this very exciting year of the Supreme Court of the land, we thought we'd give you kind of the top 5 cases to be looking out for, because they are going to have some really probably big implications on major areas of law.
And I would say, Legal Briefs is really like a schizophrenic podcast. I think you guys have noticed it. Like, it's all over the place. Like, sometimes we're talking about true crime. Sometimes we're interviewing authors. We're talking to judges. Sometimes we're talking about the Supreme Court. It's just all over the place. You can't predict it. So we've decided to try and be a little bit more responsible the way we talk about this stuff. So we thought, hey, this would be a good, organized way to give you guys a preview of the Supreme Court cases. So when they come down, you'll have a little bit of understanding of them. And if there's any of these you want us to talk more about, let us know. We certainly probably will when the decisions come down, I would think. And if there's any cases we missed that you think are really important, please let us know about those as well.
And just for some stats, we said we're going to talk about 5 cases today. Those of you who have your, Prosecutor's University degree, you already know these. But for those of you joining us for the first time, the Supreme Court is a discretionary court. Just because you file for an appeal to the Supreme Court does not mean they have to take it, except in some narrow circumstances. We'll talk about that today as well. About 10,000 petitions get filed a year. They grant cert in about 70 to 80. There's not a quota they meet. It's really based on argument schedule, but that tends to be about the number that they accept every year. And we're talking about just 5 of them. And the reason we're talking about it now is we're already beginning to see these world is on fire headlines before anything's really even happened. So I think in our typical cold water prosecutor way of trying to break down these cases, the more you know at the beginning, the more you're able to spot kind of the clickbait ahead of time as more develops in these cases, as oral arguments happen and as opinions start coming out.
And I want you to know, we used a very scientific method to determine the top 5 cases. We Googled it, and this is what came up, and they seemed like, this seems pretty good. These 5 seem like they are. So as I said, if there's a case we don't talk about, you want to hear, let us know. And these cases are from all sorts of different areas of the law. So I think that should be interesting for you as well. We have 5 Supreme Court cases to talk about. So let's go ahead and dive in. Okay. The first case is the National Republican Senatorial Committee versus FEC. Interestingly,
campaign finance. You can't have a good year of SCOTUS without some good campaign finance as speech question.
And this case was actually brought by J.D. Vance back when he was running for Senate. So let me just go ahead and tell you, we're not going to talk much about it, but we got to do a standing episode eventually. There's standing issues with this case. There's mootness issues with this case. You've got a guy who is one of the plaintiffs who's not running for Senate. One of the other plaintiffs is no longer in Congress. So you got like a lot of issues here. You have the fact that the statute speaks specifically of the only entity that has standing are the party committees. So the RNC and the DNC. Well, this isn't the RNC, it's the NRSC, the Senatorial Committee, because they're delegated authority by the NRC to run Senate campaigns. So the question is, in delegating that authority, do you also delegate your standing to challenge the law? So we're not even going to talk about that.
Good question.
But just know, this could be one of those cases that we talk about the substance and it ends up not mattering at all because of how weird it is. So you guys may recall a piece of legislation called the McCain-Feingold Act. John McCain and I believe Russ Feingold, McCain, nominally a Republican, Feingold, moderate Democrat, they came together in a bipartisan manner to reform campaign finance law. And they put together this massive piece of legislation. It did things like create super PACs, which we all know and love, had a huge effect. Well, most of it has been struck down as unconstitutional over the years. It's just every piece of it has eventually fallen to constitutional challenge. And we have this last bit. And basically, the law says it limits how major political parties, how the RNC and the DNC, how much they can spend in coordination with their candidates. These are coordinated party expenditures. So just to make that less nerdy and legalistic, I'm the RNC, you're running for president, or you're running for Senate. We want you to win because you're our guy. You've got this platform you want to run on. We want to say, hey, we want to be saying the same thing you are because we don't want to be at cross purposes. Well, this law says you can do that, but in a very limited amount. So whether you like it or not, campaigns are all about money, right? That's just the way it is in the United States. So when you say we're going to severely limit how much you can coordinate, what ends up happening is you have no coordination. Or
you reality, essentially have the puppet of yes, either the candidate or however you want to see it, right? That they're essentially the same, and then you have double the pot of money, and that's right, the other concern. And
so you got the candidate's close political advisor will leave the campaign, move over to the committee so they can run it in tandem. And what's strange about this is the whole purpose of this, and the whole purpose of campaign finance reform, was to make it more transparent so you know who is providing the money, make it so that it doesn't feel like people are buying elections, all that stuff, right? Was one of the things we're trying to do. We're trying to limit money in politics, which is impossible, but we're trying to do it anyway. So what you end up having is this shadow campaign by the committees where they can run whatever they want, and it actually gives the candidate one advantage. They can always say, wasn't me. I can't even talk to those guys. So that crazy thing they said, no, you talk to the RNC about that.
They can kind of touch the third rail on issues that will speak to certain, so that you can kind of have your cake and eat it too, right? Think of some issue that's third rail. If it's done by the committee, then they reach that subset of voters and they're like, aha, I love it. I love that they think like me on this third rail issue. And then for everybody else that's angry, the candidate's like, that's not me. That's the committee. I believe in, whatever makes you happy, other 75% of the voters I'm courting. And you see how that's you're having your cake and eat it too.
And it's also super confusing. I mean, those of you who live in swing states, you get bombarded with political ads. We should start doing political ads. We always don't do them because we want people not to be mad every time they listen to our podcast. Exactly. And then they get mad at us anyway. We don't get any money for it.
This may actually be part of it. There's probably some slicing and dicing where they're we're technically not political because it's through some other sort of PAC. I wonder if that's how they actually slip in, because we check a box. Do it. This case actually may have implications for your podcast ads, because we actually opt out of campaign ads, but you can see when there are, maybe we say no candidates. But maybe for some reason, the way that the categories are done, they're issue ads rather than even committee ads. So this all really matters because what Brett just said, politics and money go hand in hand. So much so that you've probably heard this before. What is the foundational, right in this country? Free speech.
Freedom of speech.
Free speech, right? First Amendment.
Money is
freedom,
speech.
Absolutely, speech. Well, the argument, of course, whether you agree with it or not, is that money is speech with respect to campaigns, because that's the way they speak. And so if you're limiting how much coordination is happening, in other words, how much money is being coordinated among the committees and the candidate, then the committee is saying you're restricting our free speech.
And, for those of you who you hear that money is speech and you automatically like curl up and think that can't be right. Think of it this way. You really care about an issue. You're not rich. So you can't just go buy an ad. So what you do is you say to your 100 buddies, hey, I'll pitch in 50. You pitch in 50. If all of us pitch in 50, we can buy an ad. But then there's a law, say there's a campaign finance law that says you can't pool resources that way. If you want to buy an ad, you can, but you can't pool resources. Was your speech limited or not? Is the fact that you couldn't run that ad on the thing that you cared about on an issue that was important to you because of the law, did that limit your speech or not? I assume you say yes, it did. Well, that's just the way it is, right? In the modern world, if money is limited, speech is limited to some extent. And why this becomes important here is, as we said, the objectives of this law don't actually seem like they're being met. So, like I was saying, those of you in swing states, you're getting bombarded with ads. Do you know who those ads are from half the time? You hear an ad and it's got Kamala Harris or Donald Trump in it. Maybe they're even talking, but at the end, it doesn't say, I'm Donald Trump and I endorse this message. It's like, this is paid for by the committee that
Farmers
cares about puppies. Yeah. And you're like, is that committee connected to the campaign? Are they being directed by them? Like, you don't know, right? And the candidate can't really even comment on it and certainly doesn't want to. So it's so confusing and it's so misleading in so many ways. And the thing about it, when you limit the First Amendment, you got to be successful, right? Like, it has to be a limitation that actually accomplishes the objective. That's one of the ways we look at these cases. If it's not accomplishing the objective, then it's not the most restrictive means to do it. You're limiting speech without showing the necessary purpose that you need. So what's going to end up happening here, I think, is this law will be struck down or limited narrowed in some significant way, is what I think is going to happen.
And to give you a little more procedure behind it, like you've probably heard if you've been listening to the news for the past couple decades, limitations like this, they keep going up to different courts. And the Supreme Court actually upheld something similar to this in 2001. And unsurprisingly, because there's precedent, the lower court, the district court, upheld these limitations, because remember, the district court has to basically follow precedents. And when the Supreme Court took this on, that typically signals to you they want to do something, because if an issue has been decided, there's no question about it, they're usually not going to keep adjudicating the same thing over and over. They have so many cases to look at. And then another interesting thing is, while the Department of Justice took the position that they're not going to defend these limitations, that signals a shift, and they're allowed to do that. That has happened in administrations on both sides of the aisle. But when the Department of Justice does something like that, it signals that they are also taking a shift in their position, which they're one of the biggest, voices at the Supreme Court, shall we say. It doesn't mean nobody defends it, because when that happens, someone's going to argue it. The court typically will appoint someone to argue.
One of our friends.
But there we go, one of our friends. Yeah, that's right.
They never call us, I would note.
Yeah. So just because, the entity, sometimes it's the Department of Justice, sometimes it's a state, sometimes, you can always change your position, but if it's at the Supreme Court, they're not just going to leave it like no man standing at the podium. They will actually assign usually a very good advocate, usually someone who's clerked at the Supreme Court, to pick up that argument and to defend the limitations in this case.
Now, interestingly, as Alice mentioned at the beginning, this issue was litigated back in 2001. So when the Supreme Court goes the way I expect they will reverse that opinion. So this will be a prior opinion that will be overturned. Probably 6-3, I would think, is how this will go. Sort of your standard 6-3 alignment. Though you never know. I mean, the free speech, First Amendment stuff, strange bedfellows can be made. So we'll see how it goes. I don't think this one's been argued yet, so we'll let you know when it is argued what it sounds like is going to happen.
But interesting, thing to note here, if they in fact do overturn their 2001 precedents, the lower court did nothing wrong.
Correct.
In the sense that the lower court cannot on its own decide, like, even if they're like, I think the court's going to overturn this, they are bound by the Supreme Court precedents, this is the exact kind of situation why the Supreme Court would step in, because maybe for the last 24 years, they've seen how it played out. This will all go into the reasoning of why you reverse yourself. It's usually not just, I changed my mind. It's the way it's played out. It didn't play out the way that we intended it to, and the restrictions were not narrow enough to accomplish the goal. So we'll see that here, but the lower court didn't do anything wrong. They followed precedent. Automate your alternative resolution program with Diversion Manager. Diversion Manager is a proven web-based software platform that automates and manages diversion programs. The platform benefits prosecutors' offices and communities by quickly disposing of system-clogging, low-level crimes, holding participants accountable while providing them with a second chance. Diversion Manager is used by over 600 agencies across the U.S. and provides over 30 online behavior-changing courses addressing a wide variety of traffic and misdemeanor violations, and has been shown to lower recidivism rates.
Diversion Manager's advanced workflow automates screening, communication, and disposition, eliminating manual steps. It manages processes including registration, fee handling, and document upload/verification, increasing productivity. Your office can dispose of hundreds of cases in a matter of minutes rather than days. If you need the support of our fully functional platform, which can be configured to accommodate the automation and management of alternative programs with advanced workflow, communication, reporting, and integration with your case management system, then you need Diversion Manager. Go to diversionmanager.com/podcast to learn more and to schedule a demonstration of our fully functional platform.
I earned my degree online at Arizona State University. I chose to get my degree at ASU because I knew that I'd get a quality education, they were recognized for excellence, and that I would be prepared for the workforce upon graduating. To be associated with ASU, both as a student and alum, it makes me extremely proud, and having experienced the program, I know now that I'm set up for success. Learn more at asuonline.asu.edu.
So the next case is Wolford v. Lopez. This is the latest in a string of cases fleshing out the Second Amendment and what it means and addressing various limitations on when you can have a gun, essentially. So this is a Hawaii case. So Hawaii has a law that the presumption is that if there's private property, but it's open to the public, so I don't know, a Wendy's, I don't know, I'm sure there's better examples, but I'll just use that one. The default rule is you cannot carry a firearm on private property. That's the default rule. So in Bruin, which is a case that came out in 2022, the Supreme Court recognized that a component of the Second Amendment is the right to carry a firearm. And the question is, what are the limitations on that? So this one actually, I think, is going to be a pretty straightforward 6-3 decision extending Bruin, because if the Hawaii default rule was you can carry a firearm, but if the property owner says you can't, you can't, it would be perfectly fine. They would have no problems whatsoever. But because the default rule is you cannot carry a firearm, it's going to be struck down. I think consistent with Bruin, frankly, I don't even know, given that you have Bruin, I don't know how you get this case and you don't say that. So they'll strike it down and they'll say, hey, the default rule has to be you can carry, property owners have the right to restrict. So, and some of you have seen this, and the practical effect of this probably is very minor, because most private businesses, what do they have on the door? They have a sticker that says no firearms allowed, right? Well, so that's fine. In our state, in Alabama, we have constitutional carry, which means you can have a gun basically anywhere, but it's that rule. If the private property owner says you can't have one, then you can't have one. So I think that's what's going to end up happening. Alice, I don't know if you have any
I think that's right, because of the default rule. It's kind of the whole like opt-in, opt-out sort of thing. The default is what the court's going to look at here. And I think what you noted is going to be really important, because when it comes out the way I think it's going to come out, which is that they're going to strike down Hawaii's prohibition, is that people will say we're losing our rights to regulate what we deem to be safe for our private property. That is not going to be the case. And I bet you even the dissent is going to have this long thing about
They are.
they're going to take different tacks, not only about safety, because obviously we are in the midst, every time there's a shooting, they're devastating, but these gun laws and gun rights and gun carry issues all come to the forefront again. So I bet you, even though it's not going to play out in this particular instance, because they're going to say that they can ban guns, it's your private property, it just can't be the default that they can't carry guns in there. The dissent is going to kind of go on a public policy rant as to safety, and also maybe even likening it to like a taking, not being able to do anything with your private property. So what is private property anymore? And it's going to quash business and everything. I can see that kind of being a very long, and then the news reports are going to seize on that. And that is probably what you're going to see. I can already see the headlines. They're going to say, it's open season everywhere. Business owners, run for your lives. We're already facing high crime rates, and now it's only going to get worse because people are going to brandish their weapons, because that is what we're encouraging these days. Just so you know, read the opinion. See what it actually says.
A lot of states have a pretty interesting corollary to this, and we have this where if it's a public area, like a government-owned property, they can't prevent you from having a firearm unless they have safety measures in place. So they have to have like metal detectors and limited entry and this sort of stuff. And the whole idea is you can protect me, or I get to have a gun and protect myself. And so where this becomes interesting is airports, because in a lot of airports, obviously beyond the security, you can't have a firearm, but you actually can have one in the lobby. Like, it's not illegal to have a gun in a lot of states in the lobby of the airport. You just can't take it past security. So I don't know, the whole firearm thing is an ongoing debate in the United States. If you're listening to us in some other country, you probably think we're crazy, but that's just the way we are. And it will continue to develop, I'm sure. All right, Alice, you want to take this next one? This one's really
close
just
to
a
home.
Not controversial case.
Not controversial. This is pretty boring. I don't even know why Google thought this was an interesting case to mention. But since Google knows all, we'll mention it. And that is the redistricting case that's coming out of Louisiana specifically. Louisiana ver Calais? Calais?
No one knows how to pronounce it, but I think
Great.
it's Calais.
I've listened to oral arguments, and I heard it 6 different ways, and I was like, I'm going to say
It's like
Calais.
Dobear.
Don't like it's never Dobear. One that never Dobear, I'll tell you that. So Louisiana versus Calais. Okay, so this is about redistricting. Redistricting is obviously how you draw congressional maps based on population. We have the census, populations change, you're free to move wherever you are, but when you move, it changes kind of the population where you are. So Louisiana was ordered by a court to redraw their districts because they only had one majority black district. And so when they redrew their maps, they used race in order to draw a second majority black district so that they could comply with the Voting Rights Act in compliance with what the court ordered them. Now, people
This may
said, you
strike
can't
you as strange.
you
Just
can't
like
do
right
that.
off. Yeah.
Right. They said, wait a second, you can't use race as a basis to comply with the Voting Rights Act, which said that we are not going to use race as a basis to draw these maps. And so this is putting them in a difficult place. They were ordered by a court to do it. They did what the court essentially asked them to do, but they did it in a way that the opponents say you can't do. You can't use racial gerrymandering in order to draw this second majority black district. And so this case, some of you may think, didn't we just argue this case at the Supreme Court like a couple years ago? Yes. And it has come up again. This case revises basically all the tensions that have previously happened. And every time, I think when I studied Voting Rights Act in law school, 12, 13, 14 years ago, back then it was already, quote unquote, this is from the legal case, the political thicket that the judicial branch did not want to get into. Boy, have they gotten into it, and they keep getting into it. And every time they try to extract themselves by basically not saying definitively what the Voting Rights Act does or does not require, the thicket gets thicker and thicker, and they couldn't run from this one. It's come up again. And here's why. In another instance, they said specifically, you can't use Like, they literally, you can't have your cake and eat it too. In one state, they're saying you cannot look at state race to draw the districts. And then in Louisiana, of course, they used race to draw the districts. And so you can't have both. So which one is constitutional? Which one's not constitutional? Which one violates the Voting Rights Act? It is a hot mess,
I'll tell
to
you
put
what,
it lightly.
yes, this is the most messed up area of the law in so many ways. Like, if you knew the stuff that goes on in this area of the law, it would blow your mind. It is just insane. And this case, actually, I think it's an embarrassment for the Supreme Court, to be frank, because they had this case 2 years ago.
2 years ago. This
2
exact
years
case,
ago.
but the flip. Right?
Yeah, but either way, they could have resolved this issue 2 years ago. And they
in
did.
fact, both sides focused on the fact that this exact situation would
Has already-
arise if the court did not address the question head on. And this was a classic example of the court skirting the issue to try and not have to, hoping it would just be resolved. But voting rights specifically, because they're usually 3-judge, it gets a little confusing. But there's like direct appeal to the Supreme Court. They have to take it. So there was never any world in which they would not have to answer the question. They kicked the can down the road. The can got super, super messy. Now it's like raggedy and rusty, and everyone needs a tetanus shot now because it's cutting everything along the way. And not to mention, it's incredibly consequential, because it will have massive ramifications on what your vote does in just about any state. So this is a hugely consequential area of the law that did not get messy, by the way, just 2 years ago. It's been messy for decades at this point. They did nothing to clean it up 2 years ago. Will they clean it up this time? They need to.
And so, just so you understand what's going on here, I mean, there's a few things. Number one, a bunch of district court judges embarrassed themselves over the last few years with the way they applied this law. Because essentially, there was a Supreme Court case about how much you could use race, and they just kind of went crazy and started like declaring, oh, you've got to have racially based districts. Like, you just have to draw a racially based district. And it doesn't matter how you do it. Like, the whole gerrymander thing, if you look at a gerrymandered district, it's like all over the place. It looks like an octopus. There's like arms reaching out to grab certain populations. And most people think that's crazy, right? Well, that's what you have to do to meet the obligations of this law.
To help those of you maybe understand this a little, we have gerrymander jokes in our house because, like, Brittany really likes to eat her pizza in the most crazy way. She just like eats from the middle and then from the side, and it comes out looking like crazy. And whenever she does that, we all go, it's a gerrymandered pizza.
I mean, it's true.
That's actually what it looks like, right? There's a hole randomly missing up here, and then it kind of curves around this way, and there's one tiny little stretch just so you get the right population in there. But no, if you gave like an alien a map to draw and said, hey, here's a state. Let's say Colorado. It's a block, right? Make 8 districts. What would they do? Boom, 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 boom. They all look kind of equal, and they're all pretty straight. But that's actually not what districts look like. Look at your state's district, and you'll see what we're talking about. And they didn't just create that. They were sued up and down because of the Voting Rights Act.
Some judge drew it.
And some judge drew it. Exactly.
Like,
and
not a
that's why the
political-
districts look the way they do. I mean, truly, go look at the districts in your state to see what they look like. Almost 100% across the board, you're not going to find one that I just described, where it's essentially like a block.
And look, the way it's supposed to be. So you think about Congress. I mean, these are all congressional districts, right? So, and by Congress, I mean the House of Representatives. So think about who represents you in the perfect world. You live in a city, you live in a town, you live in a county, you know, your interest, what's going on in your county. Like, I just give you Alabama, for example. Let's just talk about Alabama as a state. So North Alabama, Huntsville, there's the Tennessee River, which ironically runs through Alabama. Huntsville is north of that. You guys have probably heard of Huntsville. Engineering, space stuff, like technology, boomtown, growing, booming
I think it has more
industry.
PhDs per capita than just about anywhere in the world.
So you got that area, and you might think those people all have similar interests, similar things they care about, things that are going to affect them. They're going to care about certain legislation, not others. They're going to care about stuff that affects the space industry. They might not care so much about the peanut industry, right? Or peanut farming. because peanut farming is all in South Alabama, down in the corner, in Dothan, and around
called
there.
The peanut capital of the world. Bet you didn't know that.
There you go. And so the people down there are very agricultural, and they care about agriculture and tariffs and markets and all this other stuff. And then you go to the other side of the state, and it's Mobile. Still the southern part, but the other side, Mobile is shipbuilding.
Maritime law,
Exactly.
oysters,
seafood, environmental stuff, tourism. That's what they care about. Now, none of this is defined by race, right? It's defined by like where you live and who your neighbors are and what you're doing. And if you think about how a district really should be drawn in a perfect world, you would draw it so that it encapsulates that geographic area and those things you care about. And then your representative that you elect would be someone who understands you and cares about you, et cetera, right?
So you then have like a space congressman, and then you have a oyster maritime congressman, and then you have the peanut capital congressman. That's massive generalization, but you can see what that would kind of look like.
And instead, you've got these, like we said, these octopuses. So they're reaching, some of these in some states are just so crazy. They run from like top to bottom. You might have like a tentacle reaching into Huntsville and down into the peanut land and then over into the maritime area. And the reason for this is there was a concern when the Voting Rights Act was passed about this problem, but in reverse, voter dilution. So the idea would be, so voting, it's true, it's just a fact, tends to be racially determined. I mean, typically speaking, African Americans vote for Democrats these days. That's just the way it is, right? So you could imagine a situation in which, let's say you're in civil rights era South, and you want to prevent black people from being able to vote for someone they want successfully. Well, you might do vote dilution, where you create these gerrymandered districts, but you have them where there's like a block of white voters, and then you reach in and grab a chunk of black voters so that that group of people will never be able to successfully vote for someone they care about.
So think of like a splinter. Let's just say if you drew a district in Birmingham, it would be majority black district. And so they would all vote together and they would get, this is all generalizations, they would get their candidate. But to prevent that, this is the definition of gerrymander. Makes sense. Birmingham is one city, one zip code, whatever. It would make sense for that to be an entire district. But if you let that happen, then that, minority majority district is going to get their candidate. So instead, you're going to have Huntsville be a district, and then you're just going to reach out maybe one sliver and take a fourth of that population. And then Mobile is going to reach up and reach another fourth of that population. And then down in Dothan, the peanut capital, they're going to reach up and grab another fourth. And then we're going to have a fourth by itself. Well, a fourth by itself is not minority majority. All of a sudden, they no longer have a voting block. And you did that because you did a gerrymandered way of splitting up their population and grab them so they'd be diluted into the majority white districts. That was the fear.
It's really easy to see this in political gerrymandering. So look at Massachusetts, look at what California is about to do, look at what Texas is doing, look at these states that are changing their districts for political purposes to try and grab a bunch of Democrats and grab a bunch of Republicans. They draw the district such that the opposite political party can never have success. Well, the Voting Rights Act was intended to prevent that from happening on the basis of race. So you can't do that on the basis of race. And the way this was always looked at was, okay, did they do that? Every 10 years, there's a census. And every time there's a census, you have to redraw your districts because maybe you gain a congressman or you lose a congressman, right? So you would draw the map and you would challenge the map and you would say, hey, look at the way they drew these. They're clearly doing what Alice just described. They made this district where it's breaking up these blocks of population. It doesn't make any sense. It's not based on geography. It's not based on county lines. It's not based on interest areas. It's not based on any of that. It's purely to dilute the vote. That was the way they would look at it. And if you did that, it would get struck down. You'd have to redraw your districts. Well, at some point, somebody decided, you know what? We need to go further than that. It's not good enough to say you can't draw a district that dilutes the vote. You need to create a district. And it was, this is just, like I said, this is a crazy area of the law. At first, it was a district. You have to create a district that's majority minority. There needs to be at least one district in your state where a minority population can elect a candidate of their choosing. And so what you saw in a lot of states is there would be all these districts that would make a lot of sense, and they would do all the things you would expect. And then there was one district that was like reaching out and grabbing populations, and that would be the majority minority district, where you were guaranteed to have someone who could win from whatever population you're talking about. That has now expanded. In Louisiana, for instance, the court said one's not good enough. Now you have to do two. Why? On what basis? Little shaky. And so these redistrictings become more and more race-based. We went from, hey, we need race-neutral redistricting. You don't need to be breaking up these populations, to redistricting must be based almost entirely on race. It's not that you shouldn't take race into account. It has to be the most important thing. And so Louisiana, weirdly, we talked about this a little bit last season. They drew this district. It's Louisiana's district. Louisiana defended the district and went all the way to the Supreme Court. They argued the case. And then the Supreme Court said, nah, you know what? We want you to argue this again next term. But instead of arguing what you just argued, let's talk about whether we should even be doing this anymore. And so now Louisiana's like, oh, well, if that's the question, then the answer is
flip around.
No. Yeah.
To give you the exact opposite of what was argued 2 years ago. So the Alabama case, they had the expert who ran like all these models, right? Because these no longer do people draw these districts. It's all like with these math models that give you like millions of iterations. And that expert said, I cannot draw a second minority majority black district without putting race as the predominating factor. And so this was literally the opposite. In other words, I have to use race in order to do it. And they were like, we're going to kick the can down the road. And then what do you know? That's exactly what Louisiana has done here. And the re-argument, all of us SCOTUS nerds, we're sitting on the edge of our seats waiting for the opinion to drop in June. We're like, well, it's got to be the last day. It hasn't come out yet. And then this happens, which was truly a shock. I was not expecting that. It was shock. I don't think I've seen this in recent memory of this happening again, especially with, there's been no change in the makeup of the court at all.
It's weird.
It's the exact same justices.
I'm telling you, but you're right. I think you nailed it. They made the decision they made in an Alabama case. This happened, and the people who were responsible for that were like...
Which is the middle block, by the way.
Shoot.
Yeah.
We totally screwed this up.
Yep.
Like,
100%,
this is not the way it was supposed to
they're
go.
literally looking at their opinion and they're like, they did exactly the opposite. This is a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation, and we got ourselves in it. And this is the definition of the political thicket that we have to bushwhack our way out of now. So this is just, it's going to be fascinating how they choose to get out of this, because this is a court-made mess.
And I'll just say
truly is a court-made mess.
If they strike down these districts, I mean, the minority is just going to be siding from that case.
Yeah.
Milligan. Yep. This happened
100%.
2 years ago. It's going to side from it just the whole time. Be like, wait a second. Did you just say, like, you, same person who wrote
the
this,
exact same person?
Like, so you just overturned your own opinion that you wrote 2 years ago? Like,
at least in the previous case, it was from 2001.
Exactly.
Right? And it was a different court. That's the crazy thing. It was a different court. And that can happen as, like, you see how things play out. This played out real fast. This played out in a year.
So, like,
because this case was not only 2 years ago, but it happened and then got back up to the court.
I don't want to make anybody mad, but I'm serious. This is an embarrassment for the Supreme Court. Because if they rule the way I think they will, which I think will either be 5-4 or 6-3, which is going to fix this in some way. Either they're going to say, look, we never meant that you're supposed to draw districts based solely on race. Like, that's the opposite of what we wanted.
It can't be.
Like,
based on all of the... like,
that's the disease we were trying to cure, not what we were trying to create, right? I don't know. They're going to have to figure out some way to narrow it. But, I mean, I hope there's some mea culpas in the opinion, because I feel like there has to be. They can't act, and they often do this. They'll write something, and then a few years later, they'll write something that's opposite, and they try to act like they gaslight you into thinking, oh, no, these are perfectly consistent.
There's no way to gaslight in this situation.
Perfectly consistent with each other. And the dissent's like, what are you talking about? They're the opposite, right? Yeah, I think they got to, like, just admit, we messed this up. Like, we didn't realize what was going to happen. What happened was not what we intended. We can't do this. So I don't know exactly what's going to happen.
It has to. If they do their job, the Supreme Court, it will fundamentally change, essentially, like, Section 2 enforcement, the Voting Rights Act. And
it's a huge deal.
It's a
Massive.
huge deal, not just for like the upcoming elections, but for like all elections moving forward. And this is why people are very, very passionate about this issue. And unlike some other hot button issues, this one truly, I think this is why it's worth focusing on for purposes of our SCOTUS season. Again, I have to say it's judicial made, this mess.
Oh, yeah.
It's not just a hot topic for purposes of being a hot topic.
I don't understand how we ever got here. I really don't, because it makes sense to say.
It was earlier in the careers of the middle block, and they still were under the impression that, and it works on a lot of cases where you don't have to make hard decisions. And that came at them fast.
And I just want to say, I'm going to reiterate this, like, there are a lot of district court judges out there, including some in our great state, who should be very embarrassed about how they interpreted this opinion, because they created this mess that we're now in. Because if they had been rational about the way
they doubled down when it came back after Milligan. Anyone should have read Milligan and been like, okay, there's avoidance here. They're not dealing with it. But there were many district court judges who doubled down and actually, I would say, has made it such an issue that maybe these district courts were trying to make it so absurd that they knew that the Supreme Court would read these crazy opinions and think, well, district court judge, I'm so sorry we were so unclear in Milligan. Let me fix it now. So maybe they were all actually part of a chess piece move here. But no, the district courts across multiple jurisdictions doubled down and interpreted it in a way that is untenable and also absolutely defeats the purpose of like the Voting Rights Act, in my opinion. But we'll see.
So we'll watch this one closely and we'll let you know how it goes. From one uncontroversial topic to the next, Childs versus Salazar. This one's actually already been argued, but the background on this is Colorado bans licensed therapists from offering conversion therapy to minors. And what that means is it prohibits counseling intended to potentially change sexual orientation or gender identity. And a counselor in Colorado challenged this ban as unconstitutional viewpoint discrimination. So typically speaking, states can't tell you, you can't say this thing that we don't like. Typically they say that. Now Colorado says, hey, we're not saying you can't say this thing that we don't like. But what we're saying is, if you want a license from us to do this job, then you can't say it. In the same way, you might, I don't mean this to be inflammatory, but this is a possibility. You might have some sort of counseling requirements where you're like, hey, don't encourage people to commit suicide, right? Like, we're going to say, ChatGPT does that when you're talking to it about your depression issues. But we don't want you as a counselor to ever do that. So we're banning you from doing that. If we ever hear that you do that, then you're going to lose your license. They're saying this is essentially the same thing. And this is a law that exists currently in more than 20 states.
Yeah. And this is really interesting because when you talk about regulating speech, but with respect to professional conduct, there's a reason we have all these cases about speech. First Amendment, we care about speech. But whether we can regulate professional conduct or speech with respect to this, do you have some special rights here? Or is this viewpoint discrimination with respect to the First Amendment? Now, the First Amendment has this long jurisprudence with it. And we're going to see whatever happens here, they are going to apply to more than just the 20 or so states that have this law. It's going to apply across the nation with respect to therapy, especially as there's been a lot of controversy, not just with conversion therapy, but with basically any therapy that has to do with minors.
My understanding is Colorado kind of stepped in it on this one. And you see this a lot, right? So I think Colorado's law is broader and more expansive than anyone else's. And I think it includes even if the minor is seeking counseling and asking specific questions and wanting certain information, you are prevented even then from essentially answering their questions, is my understanding of how this works. It goes further than a lot of other states. And you often see that, as we often say, bad facts make bad law, right? And oftentimes bad laws make interesting precedent. Whether you think it's bad or not is up to you. So we're going to see what happens. I'll say this, based on the argument, which has already happened, this law is getting struck down. And how it gets struck down is an interesting question, because a lot of times the Supreme Court never goes as far as people think they're going to say. Like, it's unlikely that the Supreme Court will say, you cannot regulate professional therapists in any way, or you can never have a law preventing this kind of treatment. They're not going to say that. They're probably going to tailor it somewhat. They might not even strike down Colorado's law. They may just say, to the extent it does this, it's unconstitutional as applied, right? Because you have as applied challenges to a statute which says, hey, statute might be constitutional, but the way it works on me, it's unconstitutional, right? And then there's a across the board where you say, no matter how you apply it, it's an unconstitutional statute. So the opinion itself is going to be pretty interesting, but the plaintiff's going to win this one. We'll just have to see how exactly they win it.
And then it's going to open up it'll be interesting how it affects basically all types of therapy contexts, because you can imagine it's not just this type of therapy context. We have all types of basically anything that touches minors, right? Education, healthcare, therapy. So it's going to be the first of many questions that this opinion, I don't think, will deal with all of it. We'll see a lot of follow-on litigation to see how it actually applies. Okay, and our last one is probably something you haven't... I will say, this is like the nerd alert, awesome.
This is the one I care about the most.
Nerd law. This season of SCOTUS is awesome because we, of course, are talking about the unitary executive. Who doesn't get excited about it? Trump
Humphrey's
versus
executor.
Cook. Humphrey's executor. Trump versus Cook. We are being so nerdy right now. Okay, if you've been living under a rock and you don't... There's a lot to follow with this administration, so I'll give you that. But basically, if you remember, President Trump sought to remove his Fed Reserve Governor, Lisa Cook, over some misconduct that happened before she was the Fed Reserve Governor. So this is going to center around the 4 cause protection limits of the president's removal power. And it goes to the core of basically agency independence and the unitary executive. And those two things are always going to be in tension with each other. The agencies are under the executive. If they have more independence, obviously that means the unitary executive has less power. So it's a constant balance of what the unitary executive can do. Is it a unitary executive in practice or in power?
And this case goes all the way back to a 1935 case called Humphrey's Executor. I don't know what the oldest case to be overturned by the Supreme Court is, but this one...
This has been in the talks for over a century to be overturned.
I'll say this. I will never forget sitting in whatever class it was. It might have been administrative law, but it might have been this other class. And we got to Humphrey's Executor, and I read that opinion, and I thought, this is ridiculous. Like, this can't be true. What are you talking about? So basically, Humphrey's Executor creates independent agencies and independent executive officials who are outside the control of anyone.
Which, remember the whole 3 branches of government thing?
Yeah.
And it was only 3 branches of government, not 3 branches and then some others.
And then some other, like, king who can do whatever they want.
Who is not, who's not held accountable to anyone. The electorate and not subject to checks and balances. I mean, it really is crazy.
Yeah, so anyways, you have all these independent agencies. And the idea was to shield them from political interference, which is one of those things that I feel like it's like the siren song. It's attractive when you first hear it, and you don't realize how deadly it is and like what you're talking about. Like, our whole system of government is based on the idea that we, the people, are able to structure our government, control our government, tell our government what to do, remove people when they're not doing what we want them to do, elect people, not elect people, all these other things, right? But then somebody says, no, you guys don't really know what you're doing. We need experts who are smarter than you, who we will make independent of you, the hoi polloi, the public.
Do you remember when we talked about this with Chevron deference?
It's even worse. Like,
it is worse. No, I'm saying, but this informs what may be happening here, because remember when we talked about Chevron deference and how that was overturned, this is within the same reasoning.
And so presidents have been chafing against this for years. Like, when President Biden became president, there were a number of people who had been appointed to various things. I think one person was like appointed to the Naval Academy Board or something. Like, there's all these boards, there's all these agencies, there's all these executive, just like free floating agencies out there doing things with your money, and no one controls them. And so when it happened, and there were a few others, President Biden fired them. And there was some question then of like, wait a second, can he do that? But it never really went up. Like, those people were all like, you can't fire me, but I don't want to work for you anyway, right? And they just left, right? So it's sort of like didn't go anywhere. And you see this sometimes. There's a question about U.S. attorneys that's like this. Like, there's a certain set of U.S. attorneys the president can't remove, and occasionally the president fires them anyway. And it's never become an issue because typically they just sort of go quietly, and we'll see if it ever does. But nevertheless, so then Trump comes into office, and he just starts getting rid of all kinds of people. He's like, I don't like you, I'm getting rid of you. I don't care if you're independent, you're fired. And so this lady, Cook, is one of them. Now, he has a reason. Ostensibly, he's doing this because she committed some sort of fraud, but in reality, he wants to get rid of her so he can put his own person in place. I mean, we all know that, right? And the Federal Reserve is one of these independent agencies. The Federal Reserve has massive power over you in the economy, the world economy.
The money,
right?
Remember we said at the
they control the
this
money.
is full circle. The very first case we talked about, money talks, right?
Yeah. I mean, they're like any conspiracy theory you've ever heard, the Federal Reserve is involved in it at some point, right? Like, there are people who think...
Like national treasure.
Like national treasure. There are people who think they sunk the Titanic to kill people on board who were enemies of the establishment of the Federal Reserve. That's how deep this goes, right? Anyways, but this is an independent agency. And so the president's like, whatever, I'm firing you. And this is going to go up. Humphrey's executor says, can't do that. I mean, well, I don't know why. But you can't do that. That's just what they said. And really, the reason Humphrey's executor happened, it's just so wild. So it happened in 1935. What's going on in 1935? 1935 is the middle of the Great Depression. As most of you know, in 1932, Franklin Roosevelt was elected. He started doing all sorts of stuff, and the Supreme Court blocked him again and again, to the point that Roosevelt started talking about packing the court because the Supreme Court kept blocking him.
Nothing new is under the sun. Nothing under the sun is ever new.
It's true.
I mean, truly, this is 1935, 1932, not 2025. But obviously, we hear these same arguments now.
Eventually, some people died. They got replaced, and the Supreme Court started ruling in favor of Roosevelt. They call it the switch in time that saved 9, right? That's why we have 9 Supreme Court justices. But this is one of those things that happened, right? The Supreme Court at some point said, no, Mr. Roosevelt, you can't do that. This is an independent agency. They're independent of you, and you can't do anything to them. So that's what we've been stuck with for the last 90 years. A case that makes no sense, it's completely extra constitutional, that is based on like the thinnest reed of like, but isn't it good to have politically independent people? And it was of the times.
And you know, those of you, we've talked about originalism and whatnot in the past, and why courts having a theory for their reasoning is really important, because that's a very good example of responding to the times, but that precedent having massive ramifications a century later, because it is the supreme law of the land.
And there's no case that needs to be overturned more than Humphrey's executor, because, and it doesn't matter what your politics are. Like, if Kamala Harris becomes president in 2028, she shouldn't be saddled with people that President Trump appointed to these independent agencies that then can do whatever they want to in contravention of the will of the people and their elected representatives. It shouldn't be the way it is. And it is the way it is. And it needs to go away. So this case, to me, as I said, from the moment I read it, I hated this case. Humphrey's executor. Hated it.
And here's the thing, what we've said before as well, you have to have the right vehicle to overturn a case. So even though this has been a case, they have to be presented with the issue, and it's brought up. It's not the first time. It's not the first time that Humphrey's executor has come up, but this is the most direct, and I think this court has the appetite to deal with it.
Well, in 2020, the Supreme Court basically said, does Humphrey's executor really matter? Yeah, they didn't overturn it, but they allowed the president in 2020 to fire a member of the head of the CFPB. And they had this very specific reason why that person could be fired, but everybody knew it was kind of like, whatever. So the expectation is they're going to build on that case, which was Seal of Law versus CFPB. And that's a 2020 case. They're going to build on that case, and they will finally overturn Humphrey's executor. If they do not, it will be incredibly disappointing to this Supreme Court watcher. Like, we'll see what happens. And it's, you know, the thing about it, when these cases come up, well, I'm about to say something that the case we talked about 2 cases ago sort of undercuts. But typically, when these cases come up and you lose them, you lose it for a generation, right? Because typically, if the court says, you can't do this, Humphrey's executor, great opinion, that Humphrey's executor, well, then you're done. You're not going to bring another case in 2 years and all of a sudden overturn it. This one case that we saw in Louisiana is an outlier there. So this is really important for that reason. This is the opportunity to overturn Humphrey's executor, and we'll just have to see whether it happens.
And I would say no Supreme Court justice is listening to me, but I would say don't shy away from it. The people need you. Democracy needs you to do this. And this is not about political lines. This is about the very core of the founding of our country, which is the branches of government that are held accountable to the people. That it is just insane that my vote, who I vote in or out of office, will have no effect on these very, very powerful agencies. We're not talking about like the sub-agency that determines whether we use yellow reflective paint or white reflective paint on our highways. We're talking about like the very core, the money that makes the world go round.
And there's this myth from the early 1900s, which I still don't understand why people believe it, that like the people in these agencies are these like non-political robot experts. And they're not political. They're just doing the right thing based on science, right? And that was a very early 1900s like eugenics view. But it is not reality. And this notion of insulating from political is BS. You can't do that.
It's not our system of government.
And it's not our system of government.
There are governments like that. They're monarchies, mostly. Yeah,
dictators,
they're monarchies. And like they're just different. And it's why we fought a revolution to get away from it. So
typically we don't value having unaccountable government. Typically that's not something we like. And yet in the United States, we have these weird independent groups.
Weird pockets of it that have, again, huge tentacles into our daily lives. So these are just like 5 of the dozens of cases. They're still going to grant cert because we're like we said, we're only a few weeks into October. We're in October, the first month of the season. There's still many more to come. But these so far are the cases to watch. You should watch them. We will watch them. We will almost certainly do follow-ons to each of these. But hopefully you have a little bit more of a background as to what is before the court this season. And if you have questions, if we didn't make sense, please let us know. I'm sure there are cases we have not discussed because we've talked about only 5 cases and gone an hour. Let us know. We'll do another preview. We will talk about all 70, 80 cases if you want us to. But we try to not bore you all with all the legalese all the time. Brett, you excited about this season?
So excited. Always fun to see what happens.
So, yes, I completely agree. I think SCOTUS really loves my family because our family has had oral arguments on one of my children's birthdays every year for like 4 years in a row. But not this year. It was supposed to be. This was going to be another year. Like somehow they picked the birthday, which is actually horrible for my children because, that means that like we're not home for their birthday.
Right.
But this year it got kicked because of some of the cases we've talked about here.
Well, there you go.
So there you go. There you go. This has very real effects, but we're watching, and so should you. So, Brett, should we answer some questions?
Sure.
Because I think the chat has been so quiet, they must be bored out of their minds.
Oh, they're bored. They're just so riveted by our powerful, interpretive...
It is. It's First Amendment. It's the unitary it truly is. Like, this is con law at its core, right, when you go to law school. So.
Last year... there were a couple big cases, but it was kind of boring last year.
It was. No, it really was. And none of the cases were blockbusters, even in the opinions, because the blockbuster got kicked, which was the voting rights case. So to answer your question, the judiciary does continue to work in the shutdown, obviously, because like as the shutdown goes longer, different parts of the courts have to like shut down because other entities are affected. But I think because of the 3 branches of government, separation of government, the legislature can't stop paying the judges.
Oh, yeah. The judges get paid.
So the judges get paid, but their court support is not paid. And so then it becomes you enter different phases of the shutdown. Like I got an email from one of the courts I practiced before where they were in phase 1 where basically it was business as usual. But as the shutdown went on into like a month, they start to lose like their back funds. And so then they enter like phase 2 of the shutdown. But the judges keep getting paid. And you can imagine because there are constitutional issues with respect to criminal cases and speedy trial act.
I'm doing a sentencing
questions.
tomorrow.
There you go.
So,
So there are things that you have to do constitutionally to continue going. But you're right. Generally, it's going to be a little quieter. On all the private cases, obviously in private practice now, none of my cases have slowed down. If anything, they've gotten faster because I don't know, maybe there's not red tape in our government regulators, but my cases are still very, very fast and they're all before judges, of course.
Okay, let's see. This one's easy, so we'll go ahead and answer this one. After becoming an attorney, what's your chance of actually being able to sit on a jury? I think we've said this before. It depends on where you live.
Yeah.
If you live in D.C., good chance.
Maybe, because everyone's a lawyer.
Everybody's a lawyer. Exactly.
And it depends what kind of lawyer you are, right? Like, if you are a trust and estates lawyer, maybe you will get picked for something that has nothing to do with what you practice, or even a criminal case. You always look at the whole package when you do jury voir dire. Being a lawyer generally is going to be a pretty big strike against you in my book. But I've also talked to attorneys who really like attorneys if they think that the case is something that's very technical, that they want an attorney's eyes on, and they may strive to strike a jury with some attorneys on it. So you look at the whole package of the person.
This question is timely, so I'll go ahead and ask it. This is from Anger, and Anger wants to know, is it a goal of either of yours to become a judge?
No, not me.
So I came close to being a judge once. I don't know how close, but
You came close. You came closer than me.
And like, you talk about a bullet dodged. Like, look, being a judge is awesome. You know, there's a lot of responsibility and respect and all such stuff, but it is the most boring job in America.
And let's just say this. You guys all dodged a bullet too, because 1,000% there would be no podcast because Brett could not do a podcast if he were a judge. And so
you become so limited. You can't do anything.
A lot. There's the rules of judicial conduct, which basically you like live in an ivory tower and can't talk to anybody or accept any gifts of any kind.
Yeah. So no is my answer as well. I mean, I guess, if they ever want to nominate me for the Supreme Court or something, I guess maybe I can take that. Older when I'm older.
But you know what's going to be used against us? This podcast.
Yeah, of course. Absolutely. Yeah, certainly, if it wasn't unconfirmable before, definitely unconfirmable.
Or do you go over the swing set where you've just said so many things? They're like, you know what? Let him on. We know exactly what he thinks.
There's too many targets.
Too many targets.
Okay. This will be the last one to answer for tonight. And I don't know. If you don't want to answer this, you don't have to, but I'll ask it anyway. How did y'all meet Mr. Alice and Mrs. Brett, and what are your abbreviated love stories with your spouses?
Well, that's a fun one. You go first. You have a very sweet one because you guys have been together forever.
I met my wife on the first day of college at the University of Alabama, and we actually got married on the 15th anniversary of our meeting. And we've been married now for 10 years. So we met 25 years ago. I mean, we met the first day. We were in the same dorm. But then we ran against each other for like dorm representative in the SGA. And the problem was she was from Kentucky and I was from down the road. So like I had a built-in voter base. So I won. It's probably the last time I'll ever beat her at anything. And then we fell in love. And here we are. So
it's very sweet. And you guys have been all over the
country,
which is pretty awesome.
Absolutely.
Okay, we met also my first day at Yale, but I wasn't a student. He was a student and I worked there because I thought I wanted to be an economist. So I worked for a law and econ professor.
See, I didn't realize y'all met that early.
Oh, we met like before school started because it was at a Bible study.
Oh, that's good. That's a good place to meet.
It was a nice place to meet. And I was just trying to meet because I had just moved to New Haven.
And, I want to offend as many of you as possible. Alice was a hottie back then. I mean, I'm not saying she's not a hottie now, but I've seen the pictures from Alice, college age Alice, and Mr. Alice was, I know he was thinking at that Bible study.
It was a long time
Song
ago.
of Solomon. He was like, that's what he was thinking about.
Let's just say that life is, you know what makes you unattractive? Being a lawyer.
Whatever.
Lawyering does not make you
Alice
more
hasn't
attractive.
aged a day.
That's not true. Anyways, we met, but we didn't date until a couple years later. So we were truly friends for like 2 years before we started dating. We were both seeing other people. And then we started dating. And then the rest is history. So we always say that we found love in a hopeless place. That being Yale.
Bible study? Oh.
Wow. No, Yale.
Oh, man. And that poor guy who, like, at the library, who just wanted to show you how much
show
he
me
cared.
the world. And I did not care to. Yeah, there's so many. That will be an after dark. Dating at Yale was a hopeless place. It was the most hopeless of places. Look, they're all really successful. They're all probably going to like be our overlords.
Of course.
In life.
They probably already are.
They're
They already
very
are. Yeah.
good at their professions, but man, really glad I didn't date any of them or marry any of them because life would be so different.
Oh, yeah. I think we definitely...
we both did
nailed
good
it,
on the spouse
yeah,
thing.
We really did. We really did. Very fortunate. Very blessed. I mean, you were in Bible study, so it's not surprising that you were blessed. I was in Alabama. Alabama is not a hopeless place, but it's definitely, it's something.
It was, no, it was. It was hopeless. It was like when I lived in New Haven, of the 4 years I lived there, 3 of the years broke records for most snowfall. And it was horrible. I think I've told you guys the story where I didn't know you were supposed to like dig your car out when it snowed, and my car got frozen in an ice block, and you have to move your car from sides of the street for street sweeping and snow plowing, and I couldn't move it because it was stuck in a block of ice, and I just got ticket after ticket after ticket
man.
every week, and I finally just like wrote town hall and was like, please stop giving me tickets.
I can't move my car.
I literally can't get in my car. So
Yeah. See, I love that. I love snow. I love that whole aspect of it. But
man, not those 3 years of
I did get my car
record-breaking snow.
towed.
It's horrible, right?
Because it's like, you forget. Like, I'll never forget walking back to my dorm, and my car is sitting there on the road, and there's no one else parked on the road. And idiot
and you're like,
me.
I got a great spot.
Yeah. Idiot me. It never crosses my mind. Huh. That's weird. It's never like that. And, of course, got towed. Had to walk to the...
Oh,
With Mrs. Brett. We walked, because we were poor.
so romantic.
Walked from the Harvard Law School dorm to the
tow yard.
truck.
How far is
tow
that?
yard. It was a long way.
In the
It was
snow,
cold.
probably,
Yeah, it was
too.
cold. And then I had to pay like however
All the
much
money you had.
all the money I had to get it out. And then I just took it home. I basically
Right.
had the car and then was like, you know what, this isn't worth it. I just drove it home and didn't have a car.
You actually don't need a car in the Northeast. That's actually one
really
of the
don't.
beauties of being in the Northeast. I preferred not having a car. I wish I didn't have a car because it cost me so much money, those tickets. So eventually I researched it because if I changed the tags, I was just basically could never go back to Connecticut. And I was like, I'm never going back anyway. So I just changed the tags and never went back. I still have a few outstanding tickets, I think.
All right, well.
This has been fun, guys. Well, thanks for those questions
bonus
to
length.
lighten up the first season of SCOTUS. Look, here's the great thing. We have so many more months of SCOTUS left. And let us know what you think. Let us know if you'd like to hear about some cases we haven't covered yet. But until next time, I'm Alice,
And I'm Brett.
and this is the Prosecutor's Legal Briefs. I'm saying it's not
Okay.
exactly a roundup because usually a roundup happens at the end.
Yee. Well,
You
it's
know
a
what I mean?
preview. How about that?
Yeah, that's what
Spring Court preview.
I was just nitpicking word choice,
Roundup
that's all.
of coming cases.
Round forward.
I mean, a roundup is like what you, do
it's
with
like at the end,
cows. So
you
it's
know,
not
all
like we're really
at
doing
the
a
very
roundup
end,
either.
We're gonna
not
round
riding
it all
horses. We're not on the range. So anyway,
It really is because I was thinking of the descriptor. That's why I was taking issue with it.
I know you're taking issue with it. I noticed. I noticed you taking
I'm
issue. I
sorry.
felt the
I'm not a
issue.
perfectionist.
This October, Fear is free on Pluto TV with horror movie collections from Paranormal Activity, The Ring,
You will die in 7 days.
Scream, and From Dusk Till Dawn.
This is my kind of place.
And don't miss the man-made nightmares in Mary Shelley's Frankenstein or the world-ending chaos in 28 Days Later.
Something in the blood.
All the scares, all for free. Pluto TV. Stream now, pay never.
Shopify is a platform built for growth, whether you're just starting out or already running a thriving business. From managing inventory to creating a seamless checkout experience, Shopify is designed to handle it all. And it doesn't stop there. Shopify helps you sell everywhere your customers are, online or in person. It's the ultimate tool for turning big dreams into big wins. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/OPP,